What do I do? Do I just...
We're actually just about to be live. If you can see us live on Facebook, give us a like right now. We're coming in live for our Meet the Eco Artist series. We want to see you giving us a thumbs up and like on Facebook. Let us know that you can see us. See our connection is good so that we can start our conversation tonight. Welcome to our program. Let's see. It looks like we are live. We're good to go. All right. So welcome everyone. My name is Alexa Fanicone, the Executive Director of Teaneck Creek. I have with me tonight Ali Fellema, our Conservancy Associate, and Monica Loncola, our Meet the Eco Artist for tonight's series. And we are so excited to welcome you to our program tonight. Like I said, if you can see us, give us a thumbs up, a like, so that we know you're here watching with us. And we're excited to get started tonight. I'm going to introduce Monica and the great work that she does, and we're going to kick it off into some questions. If you have any questions throughout the program, please feel free to comment them in the chat, and Ali and I will be sure to ask Monica and get her expertise on any of your questions. So I wanted to start off by telling you all about Monica. Monica's work explores the primal connection to objects and materials that she's been attracted to her entire life. Inspiration for her work can be traced back to her childhood spent along the tide lines of the Atlantic, where a world of intricate patterns exists. Working in series, she creates bodies of work exploring different themes. She takes chances, pushes boundaries, and she's fascinated by nature and how all life coexists simultaneously in what appears to be chaos and unison. I used that phrase when we were describing this program because I thought that was so beautiful to the description of how the world actually works. The contrast of exterior versus interior, the way that nature protects and destructs, and how life grows from decay. We would like to welcome her to talk about her work as an illustrator and all of the beautiful different types of work that she does. So I'm going to throw this over to Ali to ask our first question, and we'll get started.
All right, thanks so much, Alexa. And Monica, we're so excited to have you here with us today. So our first question, could you tell us a little bit about your general background, including where you went to school, maybe some art showcases that you've been a part of?
Sure. First, I'd like to thank you both for having me tonight, inviting me to share my work with your community. I'm a native of New Jersey, Monmouth County specifically, and I did spend my summers always at the ocean. And I have been drawing since I can remember, back at the age of 3. And I went on to study in college after I graduated high school. I went to school in Red Bank, New Jersey, and I always drew all the time. And then I branched out into painting, but I went to school in the Philadelphia and New York area. I studied at Moore College of Art in Philadelphia and the Art Students League in Manhattan. And I graduated with a BFA in Studio Arts from Rosemont College in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. And I took a lot of different courses at the Moore College of Art and also at the Art Students League, so I could widen my horizon and take as many different classes as I could to find out what really was my interest. And my strength really still remains and lies in painting and in drawing. Especially, I work in pencil, ink, watercolor, and oil, more of the traditional mediums. I'm still very analog, although I do use digital medium to communicate my imagery, but most everything is done with traditional media. And I've always been a big fan of the nature and creating things with found objects, actually, as a little girl. And then I created drawings on surfaces, no matter what they were. And I continued to draw and paint my entire life. And I've also studied medical illustration post-undergraduate school. And I did draw during knee and hip replacement surgeries at Allentown Sacred Heart Hospital under the tutelage of Dr. Peter Keblish. And so I was very fascinated with the minutia of the medical world because of the cell forms and all of the different little repetitive fractal patterns that I see in nature and in the human physiology, cell life. And so when you study histology, that's the study of cells. And I always thought it was so fascinating that when you looked at cells in a microscope with the dyes that they have to put on so you can identify the differentiation between the cells, that they almost really look like abstract paintings to me. And I vowed one day that I would create abstract paintings from these cells. And so many cells are in the body and there's so many different shapes, and it's just a plethora of imagery. So that is basically the background from an academic point of view.
That's amazing. And I love how art and science is kind of merging into one in your background. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
No, that's really great. You do have a lot that has inspired you through nature and that you've done series on specifically that focus on that. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about those kind of works that you've done?
Sure. Well, on my website, I have different categories under the collections, the navigation bar, and mostly during the pandemic, during lockdown, it wasn't that unusual for me to be alone in my studio. So though I was very influenced by the anxiety of the death toll rising and the idea we had to wear a mask and we couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't be next to people. I mean, the whole thing that everyone experienced. And I noticed that in my work, it affected my work because I just didn't know how to basically rationalize people dying that were perfectly healthy and like that would just go in, and they're all different ages, and then some families lost so many people. And I started painting the view out my window initially, but then I started painting things ascending from the earth to the ethers, and I took a lot of my imagery that I like to do, which is not just nature but also including shoes, and I would draw a lot of them bunched together at the bottom of the canvas and then see them floating up to the top. And let me see if I can reference one of the pictures here, and I'm going to share on the screen here. And this is an image where I took the, let me see, let me get to that one. This is an image of urchins, and I like to paint sea urchins. And although these are colorful, I wanted to bring color into my life because color would raise my vibration and raise my energy level instead of painting the dark ugliness of death in all just monotone colors. And so we used to be all bunched together. People could talk to each other, be in the same space, touch each other. And then we really kind of had to start separating. And then people were dying and they were going up to the ether. And that was maybe an answer to that, or somehow I intuitively started to paint the beauty of their lives, and then but they were leaving the planet and they were going up to the ether. And that is a very personal approach to painting these. I paint them also individually, and I can share that with you also. This is another screen. This is another image of an urchin that I painted. Let me see, I can get to the green.
That's beautiful. And is this is in paint, you said? It's such fine line work there.
Yeah, I'm trying to find, okay. Well, anyway, it's called Violet Urchin. And I'm that was a painting that I did on oil on wood. And actually during the pandemic, I was following the online opportunity to apply to a just a moment. I'm going to stop the share for a second. I want to get back to the screen. I'm sorry. Okay. I don't know where it is. Sorry, no.
It's okay. It's on the screen.
Okay, I don't see it. I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to find it myself. So anyway, during the pandemic, the De Young Museum in the Bay Area had a call for entries because they couldn't have any shows coming in or going out because no one could travel or ship. And so the De Young did a call for entries for artists that were in the 9 Bay Area counties of the San Francisco Bay Area. And we had an opportunity to submit work, and they had over 12,000 entries, and they chose less than 8%. And they chose this urchin to be in the De Young Museum in an exhibition. And so it was a great big honor to be in the De Young Museum at all. And then to have this highlight during the pandemic. And so they were able to open the museum by the fall of 2020. And I was able to go into the museum and see my work among other very accomplished artists in the Bay Area. And then my piece was purchased by a Bay Area collector as well. So that was a highlight. But when I paint the urchin like that, I find it a very meditative process. I start out with just the color itself, and then I create those lines over and over and over again. And it was almost like a meditation for me. And there's another piece also that sort of morphed from those pieces. not just doing the urchin itself, but this is another piece called Sterling Wall. And these were from the roses in my garden. And I like roses, but I just didn't want to paint roses like in a vase with a shadow. I wanted it to be almost abstract, but recognizable at the same time. I like to hover between the line of realism and abstraction, because patterns in nature are very abstract. And fractal patterns are everywhere, even on the turtles that you use on your logo, the snapping turtles, all their skin and all like the lizard type arms and
Their
all the little
scutes, yeah, all of that.
patterns,
All individual, yeah.
So this was very contemplative for me. It was relaxing to paint like this, although it may seem very almost like as if you, I don't want to say nervous, but there was a lot of energy, a lot of anxiety during the pandemic. And when I would paint like this, it released that for me. And I always wanted to focus on beauty, because I think that it was soothing to go for a walk, and be in nature. I think no matter what is going on for you, getting grounded to the earth and grounded in nature is very healing. And so that is where I'm coming from when I'm painting these patterns. And then when of course, we couldn't go out to eat. And so we would go to the kitchen and make our own pomme frite here. And so this is a repetitive painting of like the colors that would be the French fries. So I call this pomme frite, and the repetitive fractal patterns similar to the urchin, but you see it in food, you see it in cuisine, you see it in everywhere in the world, really everywhere there are patterns. And I like to create it in a way that it's almost abstracted, but yet it could be recognizable. And that is something where I've gone with the images that I have under the collection called Colors Fields. They're just fields of color, almost like a Mark Rothko. It has painted colored fields, but mine are patterns, fractal patterns. And I'm very intrigued with the fractal patterns I see in nature.
That's such a great way to kind of alleviate the stress of everything that's been going on with the pandemic too. Like that, like you said, it's like a meditative process. That's a really beautiful way to kind of express throughout all of this what's going on.
Yes. Also, I started a project in the beginning of the pandemic where I would draw black and white line drawings when my own father was, he's a senior citizen. He was actually going to be 100 years old in October, and he was in a senior community. And of course, we all know that the senior communities were really threatened because of their proximity to each other and living in closed quarters. And so when it first happened, I went outside and I started drawing nature, but I started drawing things in black and white line because I wanted to create pages that they could color in. This is a type of black and white line here of a fish, but I didn't do them as detailed, but this is a stonefish.
Wow.
But I started to paint and draw, in black and white with enough space. And then I donated the images to managed care facilities, especially my dad's, so that the people could have nature brought into them. And my son helped me create a site on the Etsy shop called Color Me Carefully. And so on that site, if you go to etsyshop.com, Color Me Carefully, you could see the drawings that I did. And I was out drawing near my home. And it just so happened that the Channel 2 news anchor, Pam Cook, saw me, and she asked if she could interview me because she thought it was a good community outreach. And I said, sure. So she interviewed me on a live Zoom on Channel 2 on May 1st of 2020 and asked me to share with what I was drawing with the community, because I was not in the field of medical or in the food industry, but what I could do was at least reach out and give them something to do during their closed enclosure, cloistered boredom, not having any visitors even, it was very tough. So I was very surprised, but I was honored to be able to share that with the community. And now that's up on that site, you can see the black and white line. I just feel that as an artist, that's the way I could help others.
That's wonderful. And I did share the shop. It's in our comments. If anyone is interested in seeing more of those images, you can click the link in our comments below and check them out for yourself. And, get one if you want to color something in and have an activity for yourself to do. I think that's a beautiful way of sharing your art as well. Thanks for making that a resource.
Thank you. And the other collections that I have, not just color fields, but there are paintings that I've done that evolved, are inspired really by the life along the tide lines. And I had a show at the Beauregard Gallery in Rumson, New Jersey in November of 2019, before the pandemic. And I'm fascinated with how life grows from decay. And some of the images that I would draw in that case looked something like this. This is called Favorites, and I had a lot of urchins in that show, but this is graphite on canvas with oil paint behind it. And this is a large version of a bundle of mussels that I found at Sandy Hook, New Jersey.
Wow.
And the other things you see are redbeard sponges growing from a stone, and then a razor clam. And I'm a big fan of walking along the bay side of Sandy Hook and taking pictures of these things, and then bringing, working from those photos in my studio. Because I just love the idea that the cycle of life occurs constantly everywhere. And what we talked about earlier about chaos and unison, you might see these shells and everything just randomly thrown up on the shore from the ocean. And all of these things survive against the tough, pounding surf. And then they're on the sand, and then you could just walk by and step on it and it's gone. But the thing survives all the pounding and the changes of the tides. And it's fascinating to me how a whole crab could just be up there all perfect, and until someone walks along and steps on it, and where man is doing that, but yet they survived actually even death still intact. And then often what I find is a lot of these redbeard sponges and new seaweed attaches itself to rocks and to other rusted pieces of metal or wood, and the cycle just starts over again. And I think about that in life, how when one door closes, you open another door, and death is the end of not necessarily a physical death, but that you close a window somewhere, or you close this chapter and you start something new. And it's important to leave behind what doesn't serve you anymore. And in life, when the clam is broken in half, that quahog laying around, something starts growing on it, barnacles, and one day I was walking along the beach in Monmouth Beach in New Jersey there, and I saw a mussel shell, and it was just a half of a mussel. There was no more meat inside, just the shell. And I looked at it, and there were some barnacles on it, but they were bright white. And I thought, wow, these look so white. Mostly they're gray by the time I see them. And I wanted to bring it up to my studio there to draw it. So I did. I put it in my coffee cup that I finished my coffee, and I carried it back, and I left it in downstairs. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I was going to clean up. And then I remembered the shell was in there. So I brought the shell up to my room where my studio was, and I just set it on the side. And then I started drawing, and then I see something moving in my peripheral vision. And I see that the barnacles were alive, and they were opening up, and they were putting their little tentacles out. So I ran out to the ocean, because my studio was right on the beach at that time. And I got a bucket of seawater, and I put the little mussel shell inside of a larger surf clam shell and covered it with the water. And I saw all of these little barnacles open up and like try to feed from the water that they were around, and they were alive still. And it was the most fascinating thing. And I have a little video of that I may then upload onto my Instagram page or something like that. But it's fascinating how this barnacle was alive on a dead shell. And just the concept of that. I mean, I know it's very pedestrian, but I'm fascinated by it.
No, that's so beautiful. And I love the idea of like nature reusing things as well. Like you were talking about how the mussels are like latching onto things. In that same vein, could you actually tell us a little bit about your cigar box art?
Oh, yes. Okay. So I will stop this image right now, but I was very inspired by when the Obama administration tried to reconnect with the Cuban community and to open up relations. And so I happened to be in Paris at the time, and I read it in a newspaper, and I was just blown away. I thought, oh my God, we're gonna, because all the other countries didn't have the embargo that we did. So I'm sitting there like, okay, yeah, we go to Cuba, but we couldn't from the United States, and so directly. And we're 90 miles from Cuba if you're on Key West. And I always thought that's so archaic political positioning, but there's a lot that goes on besides just the idealizing of having the ability to just go to Cuba from Key West. So I went to a cigar box store when I got home, a cigar store rather, and I bought some cigar boxes. And I decided that I would use the cigar box as my canvas. And when the cigar box is closed, it's closed. When relationships are closed, there's no opportunity for movement forward or an opportunity for things to change. So I thought that I would use the cigar box as a symbol. I didn't buy the cigars, but in place of the cigars, I would take some raw materials that would somehow be coordinated with the image of my own artwork that I had digitally photographed and sized down to fit inside the box. So here is a box right here. And this is a cigar box. And this was the normal way that you would open the cigar box. And then inside is one of my paintings. This is called Oracle. And it's a pomegranate floating over the ocean. And the Oracle meaning that between the ocean and the 90 miles between Key West and Cuba, that we were trying to send a message, we'd like to reconnect with you again. And then on the inside of the box, I took 2 pomegranates and I glued them down here onto gold leaf. And because the gold was like a special royal feeling to me, like a high mark in our movement to communicate, and gold represents something precious. And so then I put lace in here to represent the fragile reality of our relationships and the waters that surround our coastlines, both of our coastlines, and the destruction that's going on in the oceans. Then I put a heart, a little Christmas ornament heart that's green to represent the environment and how we should pay attention to what we're throwing in the oceans and what we're doing about our waters and the health of the animals that live in them. And then in between these 2 pomegranates are actually 2 little white seeds. I don't know if you can see that, but it's very unusual to find 2 white seeds connected. And I'd never seen that. Usually the seeds are red and they're separate from each other. So I put those together as if we were trying to connect with a new relationship, new bright, new white, meaning, almost virginal, and a new relationship and starting out. And so I cold leaf the sides, I resin the inside. And then I also took one of my own paintings of the pomegranates from another piece that I have, and I attached a portion of that painting, a print. It was a postcard. And this painting is actually going to be in a show in Berkeley, California at the ACCI gallery starting in September. I was just juried, 3 of my pieces were juried into a show at a gallery there on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley, California. And the theme is the presence of pomegranates and their symbolism in life. And the pomegranate really symbolizes fertility, fecundity, sensuality, and communication. And so I also put a little hinge here, a little door, like a door hinge, a drawer hinge rather, so you could carry it almost like it's a little pocketbook. You're carrying your communication, you're carrying your message with you. And it's a very portable thing, which is like, hi, we don't want to be closed anymore. We want to be open. And it seems very simple, but it's very difficult. And now we don't have that relationship happening at this time that we envisioned there, we envisioned with Cuba. But in life in general, when you open up, then there's potential for movement and forward collaboration. And so that's the symbolism. And so this whole show was called Inside Open. And I made a book about it called Inside Open, on how the Obama administration inspired me to create this book. And inside the book, or in all the pages, are the different cigar boxes. There's the closed version on one side, and this is the open on the other side. And this one's called Buoyant, particularly because a buoyant here, this is a piece of cork with 2 pieces of a coral sitting on top, as if they're 2 people clinging to each other on a makeshift boat to try to leave Cuba. And they go from the rough waters here to the gold, what they perceive the life in America. And then this over here is a mussel shell filled with the little coral pieces in the waters. Even though it's the Caribbean and it's aqua, they're shark filled and they're very rough. And so the people are buoyant in this little piece of shell. And this is a painting that I painted separately from this a couple of years earlier. But I went to the farmer's market and I saw one of the vendors cut open this a Chinese melon, like a pumpkin, and the wedge was just so interesting to me, the shape of this piece of board. So I came home and I painted it just in the middle of the canvas at the top. I was so inspired. It just was just sometimes I find myself stopped in my tracks with like almost a subconscious familiarity with something, and then I go to paint it, and then the bottom I painted solid dark Prussian blue, and it was too dark, so I started to wipe it away, and it started to look like the high waves, like the mopping waves of the high seas. So I left it that way. And then eventually I looked at it and I thought it needs something else. So I stitched a canvas pocket like you would make a sail from, the fabric that you would make sails from. And then I put some ballet tulle, because ballet tulle and sailcloth are so in contrast of each other that the people inside are fragile, but the boat is a little bit more tough, but it's still just fabric. And there's so many people that come from Cuba in makeshift, vessels. And the whole book is just all about
so much beautiful symbolism for every item that you've added to that box. Is so much beautiful symbolism. That's wonderful.
And I gifted the book to the president and to Michelle Obama on the last Christmas, and they thanked me for it. And I'm very glad that I was very honored that they kept my book.
That's very lovely to hear. That's really great. We actually did have a question come in from the audience, and a lot of wonderful praise, people saying how beautiful your work is. And someone asked if you do commissions for work.
Yes, I do. I will absolutely take a commission. I work out a very specific, agreement with the people regarding what they would like, and I go back and forth a lot before the final piece is delivered. But absolutely, yes, I've been commissioned to do a lot of different things over my life as a career as artist.
That's wonderful. And I know we didn't commission you, but you were doing some beautiful work kind of in inspiration of this conversation tonight behind you. You have a lovely in the works image that you've been working on that we're excited to have you kind of share your process of what it looks like to create such fine line, beautiful, detailed artwork. And people are loving that you're from New Jersey too.
Oh yes, well, I'm a Jersey girl. You can take the girl out of Jersey, but you cannot take the Jersey out of the girl. So I do have a studio in New Jersey, and I have a studio here in California. And
would you actually tell us about the studio in New Jersey, maybe people or where your art is here in New Jersey as well?
Yes, well, I have a studio in Matawan, New Jersey, which is in Monmouth County, which is where I was raised. And I applied for a studio at the Shishama organization, and I was accepted to have it because I was living in New Jersey as well, and I grew up in New Jersey, and I had a place for a little while, but then my father took ill, and he's out here, so I had to come out here to look after him, and he's going to be 100 years old, so I haven't been able to get back to my studio since COVID, but I have a studio there in Matawan where I created a lot of work for my show at the Beauregard Gallery, which is in Rumson, New Jersey, on 109 East River Road in Rumson. And Rumson is, very close to my heart. I grew up nearby in Middletown, New Jersey, and had many occasions in Rumson. And I was also a lifeguard at Sandy Hook when I was very young. And it's a beautiful, beautiful neck of the woods, as it were. And I'm very honored that the gallery represents my work. And I had a show there in 2019 called Tideline Treasures. And it was all about the life and the sea life that I find along the tidelines of the ocean. And predominantly those paintings were all created in my Matawan studio. And I also had a studio for a while in Monmouth Beach, right on the ocean, with a family that I would house it for when the gentleman would go to Greece, and I would have this beautiful mansion basically, and I had the whole house to myself, and I used one of the rooms as my studio, and I would look out the window and see the ocean directly outside, and it was a beautiful opportunity, and I was very inspired to be so close to the water and creating the things and walking on the beach every day and finding inspiration. It was really truly incredible to be so in proximity and then have my materials next to me. And Anita Durst is a philanthropist, and she started the Shishama organization, and she finds vacant buildings in the New York metropolitan area and so gracefully fixes them up through coordination of her team, so artists can have an opportunity to create work at a lesser rental fee. And she also creates a space in buildings in Manhattan and Brooklyn for people to exhibit their work as well. It's a fabulous organization, chashama.org.
And I'm putting it in the comments right now if anyone would like to check that out, because I think that's a wonderful resource here in our area that I wasn't even aware of. So this is a beautiful way of sharing what's going on in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, I'm very honored, and I'm very blessed to have that opportunity to create when I'm back there, and I'm going to be coming back very soon. in the summer. But I also could, if you'd like, I can show you this picture behind me.
Yeah, if you could do that.
Because you have the turtle as your logo, and I wanted to draw the turtle for you. So I wanted to just show you, I'm going to be working with what's called willow charcoal, a willow stick. It's very, very lightweight. It barely has any weight to it. And it's just a very thin stick of a burnt stick of wood, basically, that has been so charred that it's charcoal, composite. And then I also use sometimes a regular pastel, a chalk pastel of different colors. And I use this kneaded eraser. It looks like a piece of gray gum, and you pull it, and it picks up dust, and it also will act as an eraser, but also a mark making tool, basically. Mm-hmm. And then there's also this sort of pressed piece of cardboard. Mm-hmm. It's a little stick that you can just rub and create your different shapes and marks that you want. So I'll show you a little bit here. I'll get up, and I don't know if you can see this. This is a painting.
Yes, that's perfect.
Angle this here. Okay, so I drew this. I started out actually with a marker to get some very dark lines. Mm-hmm. But then what I do is I take the willow stick, and I have the shape of this animal already memorized in my head. I make a very visual memory of it. And I'm going to draw the other claw here. And I do look at the anatomy of the animal, and I just know that it has 5 toes, and it has 2 eyes, a beak, where the nose is. I visually make an impression in my head. So when I'm drawing something like this, everything in the world is either drawn with 2 different kinds of lines. It's either a straight line or a curved line. They're the only 2 lines that there are, straight or curved. And it's the way that you arrange those shapes and those lines to create what you want. And often when you're looking at the animal, you see shapes that look like an oval, and you overlap them, or you can draw them in an overlapping manner to resemble the scales on their skin. And so this particular piece of charcoal is great because when you twirl it in your hand, you get a nice irregular shape, which adds to the differential of lines in the work that you're doing to make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm basically making these little curves, and then I'll draw the nail like this. And I'm just kind of going back and forth with the charcoal. And when you have irregular lines, it makes the drawing of the animal a little bit more interesting than just, straight on curves. And so it doesn't have to be an exact photographic replica, which makes my drawing unique to me, Mm-hmm. So I'm making these lines here that will just mimic the 5 nails that he has. The 5.
That's so cool. And it looks so much like scales too.
Yeah. And when you don't make something perfectly formed, then it's actually more organic that way, see? And mm-hmm. So when I make these little lines, it gives a nice pattern. When you want to make something more, directly in front of you, it would be a perfect circle. But as things go away from you, they become more of an ellipse. And so in this case, I'm going to, make this claw here a little bit longer here. And if you want to add to it, you can add that. Then you can take your finger, or you can take the little, this little rubbing stick, and you can rub it if you don't want to get your finger dirty. And you can also make them go away and use that as a shading opportunity. And then if you want to go back over it, you just go back over it. And now those are shaded in. So charcoal is a really great tool to draw with, And if you want, and then in between the toes, it's a little bit dark because you don't necessarily see everything, but you can just create and this was so fun about charcoal, is that it's so easy to work with, and you can erase it. And if you want to take this little rubby eraser I was talking about, you can then get it to a little point, and you can dab it, and it'll make little white marks. So if I were to take this charcoal and shade in, let's just say this area up here, where I have left white line, I can get rid of those lines almost, but not necessarily, but I can put all this charcoal over it. And then if I wanted to make little marks that look like the scales, but they're lighter in value, mm-hmm. I can just take this little eraser and make little dots that make repetitive patterns again. But you have to keep turning the little eraser so that once it gets clogged with charcoal, you have to find a new area where the charcoal will pick up from the eraser. And so when you're drawing like this, it's really quite fun. I find it it's such a great texture. If you put too much pressure on this, it will break. But you can also wipe and pull away and, you know, create the shading that you want. You can make the whole nail go away if you want, and then redo it if you didn't like the way you drew it initially. But sometimes you want to put some things in shading to create a highlight on something, and so everything is not equally lit in the same manner, you know. And then if you think you went over it too much, then you can just take your little eraser and kind of pick up the color again, see the pigment. And that's, you know, a great way to draw. And it's very, very accessible charcoal. It's very easy, it's very inexpensive. But the only thing with charcoal is that when you finish this, you must seal it with some kind of a spray, because this would blur. But there's also a fun thing I like to do with the charcoal is if you make it a very, very dark, a lot of times when you tap, then it'll come down and then you get this little movement of the dust, you know, and which I really like. Now, when it gets dark underneath here,
Some easy shadow work, right?
So I mean, that is how I do this. And if you wanted to go back in and make it darker, you could take a marker. You could take a marker and make some very dark lines, you know, make them very dark if you want. And there's different markers have different values. Sometimes a drier marker will do something different. This is a darker Sharpie, you know. But anyway, that's kind of how I achieve all of these shapes up here and all of these values. And when you take this little eraser, you can dab it up here and see I can make irregular little marks like the little scales on his back.
Oh, wow.
You know, so that's kind of one of the ways that I draw. But it's just a really beautiful, fun way. And you can walk away from this and come back next week and continue doing it. It's not going to go away and it's not going to dry up. That's the beauty of drawing. So when I was very young, I drew a lot. I just loved to draw. It gave me a lot of satisfaction to draw when I was very young and in my home. And I draw with crayons too. And a lot of times I've drawn with crayons on a warm surface. And quite frankly, there's a tiny story I could share. When I was about 3 years old, I was living in Middletown, New Jersey, and I was in the summertime in the backyard. I was on a picnic bench and I was only about three and a half. And my mother had given me a box of crayons, the big 64 pack with the little sharpener in the back. And, I was drawing and everybody else around me, the kids and my siblings are running around the neighborhood. And then my mother called us in for lunch. And so I jumped off the bench and ran in, have lunch. And then I came back out and I climbed up back on the picnic bench and my crayons were gone and I didn't understand what happened. And I looked closer and the sun had melted my crayons into the top of the table.
Oh no.
I was very disappointed, but I realized that that spark initiated to me that my crayons were still there, but they were in a different form. It looked like paint now. And at that moment, like the artist in me said, well, it's now a painting, you know, and in my head, I didn't exactly articulate it, but it was my first encaustic painting on wood, you know, with using the wax. And it was very colorful, but my mother was not very pleased. And I was very reprimanded for that because it was a lot of money to buy a box of crayons back then and they were all gone. Wow. So, but anyway, I just remember drawing even when the windows would be fogged up on my family's station wagon, and I was obsessed with perspective. And there was a barn near my house in Middletown, New Jersey, where I would only see the front corner of the barn, but the two sides would go back. And I thought, how could I draw that? And I realized by holding my finger up and looking at the way that the line of the barn went on the roof, I was able to understand perspective, and that I kind of taught myself that in a way, was to realize how to make something look dimensional on a two-dimensional surface. And I would just draw the same barn everywhere.
That's really a wonderful kind of way to maybe give people an idea of what they're capable of seeing if they just kind of refocus and get a better idea. You know, thinking of crayons as paint, even as a young child, is such a wonderful experience to have. Yes. That.
Well, a way that you can really have some fun is you have to be a little bit careful, but there are those kind of trays you could buy at like a Best Buy or a Macy's, and they are trays that will before microwaves and everything, and you wanted something to be warm, you would have a little sort of a tray that you could plug into the wall, and you would put the dishes on the tray when you were having like Thanksgiving dinner or something, and it would stay warm. It's like a warming tray, basically. And it would not get hot. It wouldn't cook the food. It would just keep it warm from underneath. And it was electrical. You would plug it in. And so if you can get a hold of one of those, and you could put a piece of a thick, like sort of felt boards, felt like cardboard, like almost felt on very low. And then you could put your paper on top of that and then draw with the crayon, and it will melt because the crayon's very warm because it's touching that warm surface, and it's almost like drawing with lipstick on glass. And it really kind of melts into the paper, and it kind of bleeds out, and it really can look like paint, you know? And in my sketchbooks that I travel with, whenever I travel, I always bring an empty sketch pad and a pencil case full of markers that are the ad markers, a little bit better quality markers. They have a lot of alcohol based, you know, in them. And so when I draw on paper, it will bleed a little bit, and then it could look like a watercolor. And you could just have to experiment. You can't be afraid to make a mistake, really. There's really no mistakes. It's just, you know, trial and error, you know, and then if you don't like it, don't do that again. Do something else, you know. And if you don't like the way that looks, then don't worry about it. You just don't prefer that. It's not wrong. I think that so many people, with the onset of digitalization, which is a fabulous, fabulous tool, people don't get their hands maybe so dirty. I don't know, but I think it's a very good thing to have that tangibility, get your hands in the dough, you know, as it were.
Yeah, and I think you're right too. I think people are afraid to make mistakes, and so sometimes that prevents them from trying different things. But I love the unconventional nature of the crayons with the hot plate. That's so
yeah,
unique. Yeah.
I did that with my students here. I was the head of the art department of a San Domenico school, and when I was younger, and I worked with all the children. I taught first through eighth grade, and we had lots of fun. I gave them lots of different experimental things to do, and it's really fun expanding because you're using the other side of your brain. You're actually problem solving when you're doing art. You walk up in front of a blank canvas. There's not a lot of people who walk up in front of a blank canvas and draw something or paint something or just really try to do that, you know. And I remember a lot of the parents were critical of maybe what we were doing, and I said, well, it's a challenge to walk in front of. Do you sit down and ever draw in front of a blank canvas, you know? And they said, no, but I'm not in school. And I said, well, this is what we're doing here. And it's not a right or wrong thing in the arts, you know, like math, 2 + 2 definitely equals 4. But, you know, green and yellow don't make, you know, blue. Green is made from blue. Blue and yellow make green. And so I would always teach the color wheel, and it's a very simple way to teach it. But if you understand, you know, red, blue, and yellow are the colors that just exist in nature, and everything comes from those 3 colors, you can start to understand how to make colors. You know, if you only have red, blue, and red, blue, and yellow. So if you mix, you know, red and yellow, you're going to get orange, and there's no other way around that. You know, and if you mix blue and red, you're going to get purple, and it's a matter of how much red you put in versus how much blue, or what kind of blue you're using, or what kind of red you're using, which will affect the color of that purple. And the same with green. Blue and yellow make green, and then you have green, orange, and purple. Those are the secondary colors. And those are all the colors really that there are. And you can buy different tubes of paint, but you really could make all of your colors from 3 colors, really. And it's kind of hard to believe, actually, sometimes when you look at all the color choices you can get on palettes and stuff.
We actually just had a question come in from the audience. What is your favorite as far as watercolors, pen, ink, or any of the mediums that you've worked with?
Well, my favorite mediums differ with subject matter. And I love watercolor for certain subject matters. And I love to paint watercolor on hot press illustration board, which is a little bit different than your typical rough paper that people always associate with watercolor. When I'm painting buildings, I like to use the rough watercolor paper. When I'm painting fish or another object like by itself with a white background, I definitely would like to use the hot plate illustration board because the pigment sits on top and you have to be very deliberate with your strokes. Now, when I'm working with oil, my subject matter in oil, it will be a little bit more abstract and a little bit more looser and not as direct. And my favorite of all is really working with black line, the ink, the black line. I love that. and of course pencil, but I love to draw with a black line. If I just had a marker and a paper, I could be happy, you know, because I use different mediums for different subject matter, and the subject will define which medium I end up using.
That's so versatile too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun to work in different mediums. I don't like to restrict myself. I just like to explore, and you know, I don't draw everything with pastel. I don't draw everything with watercolor. I don't draw everything with oil or paint with, you know, and it's just fun to experiment. It really is. It's just really fun to experiment in the studio.
I feel like that ties back into what you were saying before too, with the idea of not being afraid to mess up, because how would you ever know unless you tried all of the different types of paper and you tried all these different mediums? You wouldn't, I guess.
Yes, when I went to Moore College of Art, I took my junior year there, and I took a different class. You know, the semesters I took everything from fashion illustration to industrial design to sculpture to printmaking to etching to lithography, and I wanted to know, what is lithography, what is etching, what is sculpture with marble, or what is sculpture with clay, what is industrial design. And I wanted to know, because sometimes, you know, somebody might have an idea that they want to go into the arts, but they have no clue. And I would just say, take different courses if you can, and say, well, you thought maybe you might want to be a fashion illustrator, but I probably would prefer to be a fashion designer because I like to design things. And I did very well in industrial design. I didn't pursue that route completely, but when you take a class like industrial design and materials and techniques, you have to understand how materials work with each other. And that's where chemistry comes in. And, you know, almost when I took physiology, you know, you understand the processes of gases and vapors and different things. And when you can understand those things, then you can work with those materials, and then you can be really creative and say, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to use a laser for that. I've always wanted to make a hologram, you know, and I'm still in pursuit of doing that.
Very cool. I'm going to throw out the last we're coming up on the end of our program. We have about 10 minutes left. If anyone has any questions, you can ask them in the comments. Please feel free to ask Monica any questions that you may have. And I'm going to throw our last question back to Allie to ask. And if you guys have any others, please let us know in the comments. And we will ask.
Yeah. So to end us off, I was just wondering, what advice would you give to an aspiring artist?
Well, I would suggest that you follow your instinct. If you are interested in sewing or drawing or working with clay, I would suggest, regardless how old you are or young you are, to take a class or camp, a course somewhere. And online is good if that's all you can get to. But if you can take a class when you're drawing from a live model or drawing or working with clay in person, but a lot of times things are online now. And so I would try to do that first, but answer your gut, follow your gut, you know, and if you want to pursue something, then call up a school, go have a meeting with the head of the art department or the head of the painting department or whatever area you think you might want to go into, and just see if call them up, maybe call up an artist that you like or write to them and say, do you ever give a workshop or take a workshop with an artist or that you think you might like that work, or just maybe go to a school really or call up someone at a school and ask them if you can interview some of the teachers or what is it like to be a faculty member at this school or to teach art and do it. Why do you teach? Do you have to teach? You know, the arts is a very tough world and it's very competitive. And the first word that I was told that I have to understand is the word no, because you're going to get rejected over a lot of times when you're applying for things. But I would suggest that you always follow your passion, really. And if that's the case, look up schools that study interior design or that work predominantly with line drawing or fine art or applied arts, and just do some research and then talk to people in that field. And then take a class and see if you like it. I know money is a big issue with going to school. I understand that completely, but you can also become an artist and don't necessarily have to have a degree, but you just have to keep doing your trade. You just have to do it like a tennis pro. They don't get good by sitting home and not practicing. I mean, Steph Curry practices every day. He throws that basketball. He doesn't stop doing that because he's good. he's good because he's doing it. So people who want to do something, just keep following that and follow, maybe take a vacation where you might like to be in that region, where maybe you want to be by the seashore, maybe you like interiors, maybe you like mountains, and then go and then ask yourself, what is it that I like about this? What do I like about this? And don't be afraid to switch gears. You know, maybe you thought you liked something and you didn't. And that's the point of doing that kind of thing, you know. And I would suggest trying to maybe even get an internship somewhere. You know, that's always a very good thing.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. We actually had people thanking you in the comments because they're inspired by the words that you're sharing. So thank you so much for saying all that. I think it's so important to kind of give aspiring artists, you know, an understanding that they can do it. Like you said, there are always factors at play, like going to school is always a cost or anything like that. But as long as you want to keep trying at it, you can do it from home if you really wanted to, and make beautiful art. And that's, I think it's so, making that it's accessible to everyone is so important.
Yes. I mean, if you want to go into the arts, you have to really be wanting to do that. It's not there's no shortcuts really in anything. And when people might say, oh, you can learn to draw in 2 weeks. No, I mean, you can draw, but you're going to constantly need to want to draw. And if you like it, it won't be work to you, you know. So find make sure you like that, what you're doing. And if you don't like it, switch gears. It's really okay. You know, there's so much out there. But I would say follow your bliss.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Monica. I think this was a very wonderful program. Had a lot of comments back and forth in our Facebook page, and so we were so happy to have you here and engaging with us and talking about your work, because it is so much at the heart of the mission of Teaneck Creek to connect nature and art. And you do it in such a beautiful way, in such an inspiring way, with all of the symbolism and meaning behind a lot of the work that you do. So thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight.
Well, you're very welcome. And I just want to say that the drawing that I'm working on behind me, the turtle, I will gift you the reproduction rights for it. So you can use it for the Teaneck Creek Conservancy in any kind of merchandising items, and all the proceeds that you would make from the sale of the prints or whatever you make, I would donate to you for your cause. So that's my gift to you today.
Thank you so much.
That's really beautiful, and we really, really appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me today. I'm very honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I just wanted to say one last thing. This is the last Meet the Eco Artist series until October, but we don't want to stop this series. If anyone is interested in being our next guest, you can always send us an email at info@teaneckcreek.org, and we'd love to hear from other wonderful artists in our community, and even across the country, as Monica is coming at us all the way from California. So we can totally be talking with anyone in this new virtual world, which is also a wonderful way to connect. Oh, we're getting some comments in. Thank you so much, Monica.
I'd also like to just do a little shout out to the new gallery that started to carry my work based on a low tide experience I had in Stinson Beach, California. My work is now carried at the Made Contemporary Craft Gallery, and I met the owner when I was down at about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning at low tide, and I saw walls and walls of millions of mussels, sea anemones, and starfish at low tide at the end of Stinson Beach, and it was the most amazing experience. And the person who created SpongeBob SquarePants was inspired by the same area tide pools and the same animals. And Patrick is called Patrick on the show because he saw all of these creatures growing on the rocks at Patrick Point in Humboldt County, California.
Oh, wow.
So I put a little shout out to that. Thank you so much.
That's a great story. All right, we hope everyone has a wonderful week, a happy Monday night, and we will see you all soon. Thank you again so much, Monica, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.